Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Finders Keepers and to this year's Brooklyn Antiquarian Book Fair 2021 virtual edition. If you haven't already been to the fair, it's open September 23rd to the 26th at brooklynbookfair.com, and check out all the great dealers we have and all the virtual booths. Right now, though, I want to welcome a very special speaker guest to the program. And let me put my glasses on and so I can get the titles right. She is the author of Rootwork, Using the Folk Magic of Black America for Love, Money, and Success on Simon & Schuster. And this was published, I believe, in 2001, so nearly 20 years ago. And then more recently, the Hoodoo Tarot, which is an incredibly beautiful box set of a book and a set of tarot cards that are based in root workers and magic practitioners in the hoodoo tradition. And she's here to tell us a lot more about that with both a slideshow presentation and hopefully a Q&A at the end. Her name is Tayannah McQuillar, and she is a historian and magic practitioner herself in the hoodoo tradition. So without further ado, she's going to present a slideshow to you now, and take it away, Tayannah.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. So I hope that this slideshow will answer most of your questions. I doubt that a tradition this large can be covered in the short amount of time that we have, but I will do my best, okay? So let's get started. So hoodoo, first of all, is not a term that Black Americans used for this tradition. It is a word that just popped up sometime in the late 1800s, early 19th century, depending on the source that you are looking at. But that is well known that people did not use this term. We do not know where the term comes from exactly, but for the most part, it's pretty accepted that it is just a play on voodoo, okay? People didn't know what to call it. It really wasn't a terminology. So you will hear most people refer to root workers or conjurers. Conjure is kind of a term that that's gotten back into vogue recently, but those are the two terms that Black Americans use for this tradition. And this tradition is lineage based, okay? So Black America is not a monolith, and neither is this tradition. And I want to make sure that everybody is clear about that by going through a little bit of history and my own history, and to discuss who I am as a person and how my background informs my practice, okay? So let's just start off with the basics, which is a map of the United States, or what is known today as the United States, okay? Obviously, the United States did not exist, right? This landmass, there were no states. This country consisted of indigenous people, thousands of indigenous people. But we're going to focus on the Southeast because that is where this tradition, root working tradition, it really comes from, okay? So in the Southeast alone, let's go to the next slide. Okay, so this is the area that we're looking at. In the Southeast alone, there were thousands of tribes here. I understand that a lot of people only know pretty much the so-called 5 civilized tribes: the Creeks, the Cherokees, the Seminoles, the Chickasaws, okay, and so forth. But there were so many different ethnic groups here. And remember, this whole area, I don't know if you can see my,
yeah, we see
my little arrow here. This area was all Mexico, okay? So we need to really understand that when you're doing historical research on the United States, there was none of this area. It was Mexico up until 1848. So we're just concentrating on the Southeast, okay? So hoodoo is going to be influenced by these indigenous people in this area, okay? Let's go on. Okay, so you see, this is the cover of my book, and these are the back of the cards. So that is, you see, this is the outline of the Southeast. And the skeleton keys were keys that were used in very old homes, and the skeleton key opened all doors. So this is my symbolic way of letting people know that, you know, understanding the culture of the Southeast is the key, okay, to understanding this tradition. Okay, so here are just a few tribes, just to give you a sense of the tribal makeup of this country prior to colonization. Okay, so again, this area right here, these are the tribes that are really going to heavily influence root work or hoodoo. Okay, so I'm just going to talk a little bit about the culture of the Southeast. Most people, when they are aware of Native American or American Indian culture, they're focused on the Plains people most of the time. The Sioux, the Comanches, the Navajos, okay? But they had their own culture. It was a very different culture than the woodland Indians of the Southeast and the East Coast, okay? Different dwellings, different spirituality. You're going to have some uniformity, of course, but like I said, we're just going to focus on this. So this is basically what the Spanish, because the Spanish were the first Europeans to encounter the indigenous people of the Southeast. So this is pretty much the scene they would have came across, okay? And so unlike the Plains people, they had teepees, and like they used temporary housing, but this in the Southeast, the housing was permanent. Okay, we were not a nomadic people here, and that is very, very important because of the misconceptions that, you know, and the idea that all Amerindians have the same culture, or there's one way of seeing things, doing things, and that is absolutely not true. So I just wanted to give you a sense of that. Like I said, I'm moving fast. So what a lot of people also are not familiar with or don't know about American Indian culture is that that most tribes were multilingual. Okay, they usually spoke the languages of the tribes that surrounded them. Okay, and in instances where they didn't speak the same language, they used a trade language. This is an example of one of the American Indian trade languages. It's called by linguistics experts, Mobilian trade language. Okay, so like I said, your surrounding tribes you would understand, but let's say you need to speak to somebody from the Plains or from the West Coast or further north, and then you would use this trade language. And this is a graph representing the medicine wheel. This represents the different components of American Indian spirituality. Now, this wheel is going to be different depending on the tribe, but this is basically just a graphic of how they perceived the world. Okay, just wanted to just show you that, and I'll get back to that in a few minutes. Okay, so this is a medicine man. A very early illustration. I think this is about the early 1800s. This was illustrated by a colonist, okay, of what these medicine men look like. And this illustration is from North Carolina, and you see he has a bird on his head that to symbolize his power. Okay, I also want to let you know that that most Southeastern tribes, if not all of them, were matrilineal, okay? Meaning that your lineage, your identity went through your maternal line, not your paternal line, okay? And I'm saying all of this because it's going to be very important in understanding not only Black American culture, but also root work and also my deck. But at any rate, so your identity was through your mother, okay? Your clan, which is like different animals, different plants, again, depending on the tribe. Those were the symbols that were associated with different clans, and that animal or that plant was considered an ancestor. So it was considered incestuous to date or to marry or to have children with someone that was in your clan. And again, that identity, you received your clan identity through your mother, okay? So that was taken very, very seriously. The penalty for violating that law could be exile or even death, depending on the tribe, okay? So yeah, let me just keep it moving here. Okay, so I'm going to get into European contact now. Okay, again, the Spanish were the first to explore the Southeast, and so we're just going to leave them alone because this is the population that I really want to focus on because it influenced the Southeastern Indians so much. Okay, so the Pilgrims, right? They weren't called pilgrims, they didn't refer to themselves as pilgrims, but they were called separatists, right? So the separatists came here, some by choice, some by force. Okay, that's something that a lot of people do not talk about or don't know much about, is they could have been exiled from Europe for religious differences. Maybe they were prostitutes, thieves, all kinds. It was just a way for Europe to get rid of their undesirables, to kind of exiling a lot of their people to what would be known as the United States today. So a lot of people are just not familiar that a lot of these people did not have a choice to go back home, even if they wanted to, okay? Because the penalty for them would have been death or imprisonment for life. So often you have a choice of, hey, what do you want to do? Do you want to die? Do you want to, you know, go across the sea and try your luck there? And, you know, people most of the time would choose, you know, to live and to try and start over. So that is what happened. And especially a lot of early Scottish settlers came to the United States and Canada and other places by force after their rebellions against British occupation and the usurpation of their culture. You know, after their rebellion failed, they were kicked out. So when they got to the Southeast, all these people came to the Southeast. Obviously, they knew nothing about the culture. They knew nothing about the people. They were scared. They didn't know how to farm anything because, you know, it's a different world or a new world for them, right? It's not the new world, but it was a new world for them. And they didn't know how to survive. So indigenous people had to help them and teach them how to, you know, survive here, you know, how to eat, how to farm, because they didn't know what they were doing. Okay, so when they got here, they encountered these strange dark-skinned people. This is from a book, and I believe the title, I'm so sorry. The title escapes me right now. It's the land that they lost, or something of that nature. I will give that title to Brian later for anybody that wants to look at it. But at any rate, in this book, it talks about how most African people came from a patrilineal society. Okay, and so just really quickly, it's very important to understand that like I said, American Indians are matrilineal, and Black Americans are historically matrilineal as well, because a lot of us are descended from American Indian people, okay, that were reclassified as Negro, colored, mulatto, okay, because the idea was to kill the Indian. You know, you hear about smallpox and things like that in school, but more Indians were killed by the pen instead of the sword by simply being reclassified as something else, okay? And that's very, very important, and this author spoke about this. So, you know, so really quickly, most Africans have been brought up in a patrilineal society. Something that has interested and at times confused scholars is that slaves arriving in the South frequently forgot this aspect of their heritage and became matrilineal. Many facts help to explain this. A minority of the slaves, including some of those coming from West Africa, have been reared in a matrilineal culture. And the instability of the slave family in America enhanced the role of the mother, who was more likely to stay at home. In time, the white man's law decreed that the child must follow the status of the mother, regardless of her racial background. But the most obvious and probably the most likely reason is the fact that so many Negroes were not Africans, but Indians. A matrilineal society was the norm among Mississippians. They called that culture the mound building culture, the pyramidal structures, the Mississippians. And it is probable that the matrilinealism arrived with among Southern Negroes in the same fashion as did Brer Rabbit, grits, ginseng tea, forebodings associated with an owl's hooting, and the green corn dance, which a lot of Black American churches still had up until very recently, okay, is this harvest festival, green corn, okay? So a lot of people just don't know that. They just assume that dark skin and broad features had to arrive on this continent with African people, but there have been people with my features here since forever, okay? This is just another example of another author that has spoken about this. Among the other Black nations who existed in the Americas before Columbus and long before Christ were the Yamasi Indians, who had a large kingdom in the southeastern United States. Their descendants were among the first Blacks of pre-Columbian American origins to fall victim to kidnapping for the purpose of enslavement. And the descendants of the Yamasi are the millions of Blacks who live in Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, and northern Florida. The Yamasi are not extinct, as this is the chief of the Yamasi and his wife here on the right. Okay, he speaks extensively about this erasure and the fact that his people, they tried to help a lot of the Africans, and a lot of us are familiar with the history that African people ran away to a lot of Indian villages and they were protected and helped. But what most people don't stop to think about is how could they hide among the people when the colonists were trying to catch them if they were not dark-skinned, broad-featured people themselves? They would have easily identified the African person, right? So anyway, I'm just showing you that this is much deeper than a lot of people realize. So being different, being not patriarchal like Europeans and other so-called people of color made us stand out, okay? And our matriarchal culture, when I say our, Black Americans, right? We were always, and still to this day, are disparaged and ridiculed and criticized for being matriarchal. So there's a long history of academics and other people kind of blaming any dysfunction in the Black community on the fact that we're matriarchal people. Okay, so the Black matriarchal system, a common culprit, it just goes on and on. They actually said we're retarded, you know, the matrifocal family and its relation to mental retardation. Like it just goes on and on. Okay, so, and this is the Italian explorer Verrazano. If you're from New York or know New York, right? The Verrazano Bridge was a thing, and he saw Black. You know, I don't like using these terms because these terms are colonial terms that came much later, but people that would be described as Black people today, that he saw them there. Okay, so the complexion of the Carolina Indians is Black, not much different from that of the Ethiopians. Their hair is Black and thick, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so we see his illustrations there. This is the oldest image, the oldest illustration of an American Indian that was drawn by a colonist. And as we see, he is a dark-skinned person with broad features, maybe even characteristically called a Black person today. And of course, a long legacy of whitewashing American Indian images. This is an example. And in the history books and in exhibits all around the world, this is what happened. His name was Athore, I'm not sure, or Athor. That was this chief's name. He was chief of the Timucua people, the indigenous people of Florida, and he's gotten a makeover quite a bit. Also, in addition to whitewashing American Indians, kind of redoing the artwork and things like that, you also get the mestizoization of American Indians that are dark-skinned with broad features, meaning, you know, mestizo is historically a person that was half European or had European heritage and American or Amerindian heritage. Okay, so those features are preferred, or historically was preferred, okay, and even in casting of movies and things like that. Okay, so this is just more information on this guy. This painting was from, this one was from 1564. A French academic wrote this book, and his career was pretty much ruined. The Primitive Black Nations of America, and this book is very, very interesting, and he talks about all the Black nations that were found here. And this is all suppressed history. And I could just go on and on. Carlos Cuervo Marquez. It is likely that we repeat America was a Negro continent, and is talking about all the figures and skeletons and things that were found. They are not the phenotypically what you expect or what people expect because of this suppressed history. Jean-Baptiste Durand. The Blacks are a kind of men destined by nature to inhabit Africa and America. This is not new information. This book here talked about the Shoshones. Their skin is nearly as dark as that of the Negro. Indeed, they greatly resemble the African in color and general appearance. This is my cousin and one of our ancestors. He actually fought in one of the first Anglo-Powhatan wars, I believe, and he was Mohegan. Okay, and she looks just like him. And even in anthropology, there was the notion that American Negroes are Australoid people, because, you know, mankind was divided into these, you know, categories that are somewhat offensive to people now. I'm just going through the history so you get a full view. Okay, so there you have that. Okay, this is like from an old anthropology book. And this is one of the illustrations here of what an American looked like prior to colonization. Even the N-word, people, okay? A nigger was a dark-skinned person of any origin, but specifically in early United States are usually with reference to American Indians. So Negro was kind of a lump. Everybody was lumped in. Like I said, the purpose for colonists to do this was to erase the Indian on paper. So Indians were hidden under the Negro and colored and free people of color and mulatto classifications, okay? So a lot of people are not aware of this history. Okay, so this is in the Caribbean, the same thing over and over again. Negro conjurement in Puerto Rico. The colonists could not distinguish between an Indian and an African person, either by appearance or even their religions or their spiritual pathways, because they were so similar. This is a study that was done and that discusses also the routine reclassification of Indians as Black people. Indian on the reservation and Negro off the reservation. I found several ancestors that were reclassified, but I'll show you that later because, like I said, rootwork is a lineage. This is the oldest reconstruction of earliest bones found in Texas. if she were to come alive today, I'm sure a lot of people would classify her as African American. Is another view of her. So now the theory, there's this back and forth theory about where people began. The out of Africa theory has been in vogue for a long time, but this Australian Genesis theory is increasingly becoming in vogue. So they found this skeleton, and this is the first known American face. Okay. Another one. See the surprising face of the first American. Okay, so modern Native Americans closely resemble people of China, Korea, and Japan, but the oldest skeletons do not. This is old stuff, people. Okay. Again, this is what happens. So the originals on the right of Yellow Thunder, he's dark-skinned and broad-featured, and he was whitewashed or mestizo-ized, whatever you want to call it, to look like way people want to see American Indians, as light-skinned, Mongoloid, or Asiatic-looking people. So anyway, I just wanted to go through that so you got a sense of, just the depth of United States history in a very brief amount of time. So here we have the Jamestown. Like I said, the colonists didn't really know what they were doing because they didn't know how to farm the land. They didn't know much about the animals here. So what do you do when you don't know how to survive? You eat each other, okay? And this is something that obviously caused hostility, right? It caused hostility with the indigenous people because the colonists ate each other, and then they were catching and cooking indigenous people. Okay. Let me just make sure I have my notes here. Okay. Okay, so this is, so like I said, the Scottish came, here, they were oppressed by the same population that was oppressing the indigenous population here, and there were a lot of intermarriages in the beginning, but there were a lot of intermarriages in general. This is something you will not see or have not seen possibly in historical films. There were no anti-miscegenation laws until later, okay? In the first 200 years or so, everybody was having sex with each other. It just wasn't a thing, okay? So the Scottish, because they had a very similar culture in terms of having a clan system and living off the land, and there were just a lot of similarities that these two groups found in each other. So they were heavily linked. Okay, so this is a really good book if you want to get some more insight into into that relationship. So this is another group of people that were also thrown into the mix, right? So you did have African people that were transported here throughout the Americas. And these are our ancestors. That's what I'm showing right now. I'm showing the ancestors of so-called Black America, okay? And really America in general, like I said, whether people want to acknowledge it or not, the beginning of this country, this colony, I should say, everybody was having sex with everybody. It wasn't race-based, this kind of separation, okay? It was more rich and poor than anything. Okay, so anyway, so African people from the Congo, a lot of people from the Congo and West Africa were taken. Mostly they were sent to Caribbean and South America. The North America got very, very few Africans comparatively to South America and the Caribbean. The last time I looked, the numbers were under 200,000 people. In my book, it's even higher. but it fluctuates because there's like a database online, and I have all that in my bibliography where you can check. But yeah, that's pretty much the predominant African group, and there are many thousands of different ethnic groups in Africa, and hundreds in West Africa alone. Okay. And this is the Congo. Out of all these ethnic groups, the United States got the most people from the Congo. And here's their cosmogram, okay, of how they see the world. And if you recall the cosmogram of American Indians, you notice that it's very, very similar. So, you know, they got each other, in other words, right? Because they had a very similar worldview that everything is connected, plants, animals, everything in existence is our brother and sister, okay? Not to be dominated, but to be in a reciprocal relationship with, okay? Okay, so these are the indigenous people of the Philippines, okay? Again, there's a lot of suppressed history around the slave trade. It wasn't just an African trade. The first slaves in the United States were the indigenous people here. And then Africans, and you have the Trans-Pacific trade with indigenous Filipinos that were brought here as well and transported to America. There were also yellow-skinned or, you know, yellow-skinned or mongoloid, for lack of a better term, just to give you these terms. I really hate using them, but I have to here. Looking people that were also brought here to what we know today as the United States. They were enslaved here as well, but mostly in colonial Mexico. There are a couple of good books on that. Okay, so the Plains Indians have a lot of Asian blood, also because of the Trans-Pacific trade. Okay, you also had people from India that were enslaved in colonial America. Okay, and all of these people, the indigenous people that were already here, the West and Central Africans that were here, the Filipinos, the Pacific, the Trans-Pacific trade, and people from India, all of these people are the ancestors of Black Americans, because we were all lumped into one Negro colored whatever category. Okay. And these are indigenous people of the Pacific, right? So Hawaii, Samoa, Fiji, a lot, you know, we don't see this. We don't see, you know, movies showing these people were also enslaved here. And this practice was called blackbirding, okay? So I actually knew a woman that did her genealogy, and she thought that her ancestor was American Indian, but it turned out that her ancestor was actually an indentured servant, and who had migrated to Georgia, and her name was like Mary, like something really generic, but she came from Hawaii. So again, Black America is not a monolith, and the roots does not tell the whole story. There are many, many different roots of our people. Okay, so this is just just getting back to root work, now that you have, you know, a sense why I said it's lineage based, depending on your family or you know, it can take on a totally different tone. You know, the combinations here, you see all these different types of people, you know, come together. But there are some certain characteristics that a lot of or most root workers, you know, kind of participate in. Or so the use of bones, of animal materials. Every tribal people that I ever researched have used animal parts in order to attain some kind of power from them. I mean, we know now, based on Western science, that even the smallest bit of material from your body contains all the information about you, right? And information about your family. We've known that for thousands of years. We didn't need DNA to tell us that, right? So that's why we wore bones, or we, took fingernail clippings or hair clippings, because, and put them in things, because we understood that it didn't matter how small it was, it's still a part of you. So your essence is in that thing, or the essence of that animal is in that material taken from its form. So throwing of bones or throwing of objects, this is something that was a practice among indigenous people here in the Southeast, and it was also something done in Africa, okay? So you're going to have this kind of similarity. It even looks similar, okay? The American set here that's shown on the left, you see there's like a modern campaign button, it can get really creative, okay? But these different objects are usually cast upon a cloth or the ground, depending on your style, right? To divine for people. Here's another set of what we call throwing the bones. And it doesn't have to just be bones. It can be, it has a little sewing button here, okay? This person just chose to put some kind of deity or African mask or whatever. It can get as creative as the person. This is a practitioner who was pretty well known. So here he has a wasp's nest and some bones, and it's all about using materials from the earth, okay? And playing cards, okay? Because I get a lot of questions. How did you fuse hoodoo with tarot? Okay, so playing cards have been used as a divination tool for centuries for Black American women. People from all over would come to our communities, especially a lot of like elite white women would come to Black side of town without telling anybody, right? To get readings, to get remedies, especially in regards to marriage, during a time when women didn't have, much say, and they didn't have much prospects of success outside of marrying up or marrying someone of means. So they would come to our communities to get information about how to lock in this lover or whatever. So you will see, as you see from this clip here, anybody's seen Carmen Jones, starring Dorothy Dandridge and Harry Belafonte, you will see many, many, many different elements of root work or hoodoo in the book. Here's Dorothy Dandridge. She pulled the 9 of spades, and everybody is just really concerned about the fact that she pulled that card because it was, a sign that, really bad things were coming her way. And if you saw the movie, you know that that was absolutely an accurate reading. But there are also many other elements of root work in this film. And a lot of older Black films that would be seen as offensive and may not be available streaming services or whatever because it's offensive to modern viewers, but it's a shame because there are so many different truths told in those films, just accidentally, just people talking about their lives, and hoodoo and a lot of other things that I mentioned in the book about our secret societies that were prevalent in the Black community are discussed pretty freely in these old films. So this is, just planting by signs and phases of the moon. Everybody had to do it. United States was a agricultural, place, like a lot of other places. Agriculture was the main way people made a living. So you had to know, if you're a farmer, you have to know about the nature of what you're planting. You have to know when the proper time to plant, to reap, to sow, right? And you also have to know about the animals in the area and how they function in order to make sure you don't lose your crop, okay? So this kind of this, so Black Americans in a lot of journals, you can find all this information on my Instagram as well. I post a lot of old academic papers and things like that, saying a lot of things I'm saying. You know, we were considered the best at this, like just the timing, and we were compared to like ancient Greek astronomers, all kinds of stuff. Okay, but that is a very, very very strong part of hoodoo is, you know, just knowledge of herbs and knowledge of what to do and when to do it. Okay, so proper timing is everything. Augury was something that you had to be pretty good at. Okay, I'm not saying that all root workers do these things. I'm just giving, you know, a general idea of certain practices that a lot of root workers I've met over the years do. And so historically, augury was something that was used, just being able to read the patterns of nature. Okay, so on this card in my hoodoo tarot, here you have this woman, you know, that's on this horse, and she had to rear up because she's changing directions based on the fact that there's a flight of birds above her head. And it's kind, and if you can squint your eyes, you see that they're making the shape of an arrow, kind of giving her a sign that it's time to change direction. You see, she was going pretty fast in the direction she was headed in, right? That's why the horse is like, whoa, okay, it's time to turn around. So it's a lost art, especially for people that live in cities, you know, or, you know, and a lot of wildlife in general, even if you don't live in the city or endangered, you know, it's hard to be able to read animals because you have to have the animals actually around to read their behavior or interpret what that screech means. Okay, the dog barked 3 times, or there's a possum that circled the house 4 times. These things had meaning to people. And they were used and taken very, very seriously. But again, because of habitat loss, and you know, that's getting harder, you know, except for people that are really deep in the country that have access to all of these indigenous animals roaming about. Everybody came to Black women for dream interpretations. Like, that's really big. Even in a lot of Black American homes to this day that have no ties to hoodoo or would deny any ties to hoodoo, that is a big thing. You know, what did you dream about? And talking about dreams, and I dreamed such and such happened, and it's taken very, very seriously. Well, yeah, in the past, you know, these kind of dream books came out using the images of Black women, yeah, you know, as a way to, as a marketing ploy to show you that this dream book really has the right information, right? Because there's a Black lady on it. Okay. Okay. So this is getting into the lineage part of my personal lineage, because I remember, Brian, we had a discussion. You were asking about how my lineage informs my practice or something of that nature. And like I said, your lineage is everything, okay? All of these different ethnic groups from Europe, from Africa, from the Pacific, you know, just everywhere around the world that converged here by choice or by force. I mean, they were together, okay? Whether people like it or not, they lived together, they slept together, they worked together. And if anybody's out there that ever dated anybody from a different race or ethnic group, you know that you share information. This recipe, you know, certain, you know, music even, or so, you know, just everything. You share things. Okay. This happens to be one of my ancestors, James Logan. This is an actor pretending to be him, but he was Scottish and he married into the Chickasaw tribe. And I'm just showing you this because I don't know. I mean, like, on both sides of my family, I have a very strong hoodoo lineage, but this is my maternal line. So I'm assuming, as a researcher and knowing what I know about culture, there might be these different elements from these different ethnic groups that exist within me that inform the practice. Because, like I said, when you're in bed with somebody, you know, you tell each other stuff, okay, and you take on each other's habits. Oh, I like that from your culture. I think I'll do that from now on. Okay, so that's pretty common. So that's him. So there's so much Scottish because like I said in the beginning, there were so many Scots here, and so many of them married indigenous women. Some can say that it was, just the ploy to get access to the land, because American Indians were matrilineal or are matrilineal people. The land, the property, your identity, everything went through the mother. Okay, so at any rate, there's ragtime. It's like an old form of jazz, and this is an old article, discussing how Scotch the music actually is. Okay, again, so this kind of intermingling of cultures creates a new thing, if you will. Here's another. This is my 15th great grandfather, Emmanuel Rodriguez. He was from the Congo, and he married a Caribbean woman. I do not know. She's supposed to be an indigenous woman from the Caribbean. I don't know anything about her. I just know that he was half Portuguese and half Congolese. Okay. So again, that could have been something that influenced the root work in my family. I'm still researching. I'm just showing you some of my ancestors here. I'm pretty much related to everybody on this plaque here in Virginia that fought for the nation's War of Independence. You have the Cumbo family and the Brown family. This is my fourth great grandfather's church, Abraham Brown. And he was classified as mulatto, but I found out through the research that he was actually Pamunkey, Powhatan person. Okay, and so he was a Christian pastor, and his church is the foundation church for a lot of the American Indian churches in Virginia. So this is Samaria Indian Church, which is an offshoot of my fourth great grandfather Abraham Brown's church. So you're going to have this, of course, the Protestant element of hoodoo, which is what makes things very different from voodoo, which is a religion, and its Christian roots are Catholic. Okay, but the separatists or the pilgrims, most of the Europeans were Baptist or Protestant people. So all these things combine to create the people, American Black people, and our culture. This is another ancestor, my 14th great grandfather, Emmanuel Cumbo, and he was a Portuguese-speaking Congolese man from the Kingdom of Ndongo. This is my ancestor, Nick Cabell. I believe he's another fourth great grandparent. He was half Shawnee and half Powhatan and British on his father's side, a very cruel man, a slave owner, okay, who literally sold his children down the river, where that term comes from, or up the river. Because Virginia, what he would do is he would have babies with the indigenous women or the African women, whoever was working for him on the plantation. And then he would, as soon as they were born, he would sell them to other plantations further in the deep South. Okay, so, and actually this was, my family was working on the tobacco plantation, and they actually called it Montezuma. So he had no kind of sense, like just because he was half American Indian, he didn't really care, about other American Indians that he was enslaving or whatever. These are more of my ancestors. This is the Rainwaters on the left. They're Cherokee people, and their paternal line is Scottish. And these are the two, for lack of a better term, whitest looking of the two, Scottish, and they got a lot of got ahead faster because they made sure they kept their hair short. They made sure that they kept the European appearance, and the family was able to amass some wealth. And it was just a good arrangement all around for everybody. For the American Indians in the family, it was a way to avoid at least a little less persecution by being married to white men. This is another one of my ancestors, a root worker. His name was Andrew Diggs. You will see a lot of staffs and things like that. And in the hoodoo tarot, I have, instead of wands, I have these sticks. And he's letting you know who he is with this portrait. Okay, he has a snake staff in one hand and peace, and a handkerchief in the other to represent that peace. And you know, just those both are his sources of power. You know, this is my cousin Nazalie, my late cousin Nazalie, who was a root worker for over 40 years. Okay, she raised all of her children. She never had any other kind of formal job. That was her job. She just passed away about 6 years ago, but she's looking kind of pissed there because I tried to approach her like, you know, like a regular academic, you know, and she just was having none of it. You know, my grandmother, you know, told me not to do it. This picture was taken about 2002. And I just came to her like, could you tell me a little bit about root work? And, you know, she's like, you know, if you don't put that fucking pad down, you know, and leave me alone, you know, I don't know what you're talking about, because it's not something that people talked a lot about. It's still to this day. Well, now it's getting a little bit more fashionable to talk about among younger generations, but for people like Mother Nazalie, it was not something that you discussed in that way. And you definitely didn't, you know, I don't know, kind of interview them, you know, it was considered insulting. So after I was thoroughly cursed out, you know, I just kind of sat back and watched, and I just, you know, I asked questions, which she just didn't answer, you know, and then my grandmother said, why don't you try observing? How about that? You know, and that's what I did. And after a while, you know, after she stopped being angry with me, we got very close, and she taught me a few things, but the way I approached her, she found insulting, and she felt like I was acting like a stranger. I was acting like a foreigner, or, you know, just somebody like condescending almost. So the old-fashioned way was to shut up and observe your elders. You know, unless it's absolutely necessary for you to verbalize a thought. So that is the conclusion. Please remember that Black America and Hoodoo is not a monolith, okay? The ethnic composition of each family, their neighbors, and/or popular culture will inform the knowledge and practices of root workers. So for today, and you know, a lot of root workers or people that are claiming to be root workers, a lot of them are incorporating a lot of spiritual practices from Africa and the Caribbean. You know, so you're going to have lots of candle burning and things that we didn't really do in Hoodoo, because the heavy reliance on candles, on white candles and little penny candles and stuff, that comes from their heritage in the Catholic Church. You know what I mean? So like I said, you know, that's seeping in as more and more African and Caribbean immigrants have moved here. So now you're going to see it's kind of hard. It's getting even harder to make a distinguish between other practices and what, you know, in the hoodoo of the American South, except, you know, for people that are trying to, I don't know, keep things pure, for lack of a better term. But as I showed you, there's no, I find these arguments of purity arguments to be kind of weird because of the history involved in this country, and in the practice, because we are our ancestors and we are a combination of all of these elements, whether people like it or not. So I hope that the slide presentation helped.
Thank you, Tayannah. Do you want to click out of this so that we can go and do a little Q&A if you have time?
Sure.
Okay, cool. That was really exhaustive, and I think for a lot of people will be kind of like a new history. And it's the thing that intrigues me is that looking at this book, which was published in 2003, I said 2001 in the introduction, but you said that the image of yourself and your cousin was in 2002, and that basically it wasn't something that she wanted to talk about. And I noticed that in the back of this, that you had 3 references in terms of bibliography. And in this, you've got 70 or 80 references. What's the difference in the last 18 years? Is there a huge difference between these books?
Yes, absolutely. Well, first of all, I was a kid when I wrote rootwork. Actually, well, maybe not a kid, but I was in my early 20s, and it was in college at the time. And I was just heavily influenced by different advisors, to speak a certain way, to be a certain way, to approach the topic a certain way. And it didn't feel right, but I was young and I felt like I didn't have a voice, and I didn't want to rock the boat any more than I was already, because I got a lot of hate mail for the root work book. A lot of Black people were very, very angry with me about the fact that I published that book. A lot of family members were upset because, like I said, this is not something that you talk about, with anybody really, except your family. And even if you do talk about your family, it's, kind of hush hush. And definitely not talking about it in front of white people. That is something that just was not cool to a lot of people. But so that's what I was dealing with. I was under a lot of pressure, and I felt like I couldn't quite really say everything that I wanted to say. But now, it's 20 years later, I'm grown, I'm fully grown. I'm not afraid of anybody. I'm not afraid of anything. I'm not working for anybody. I'm not a part of any program. So I can say that what the hell I want. And I also wanted to update the information based on my newfound confidence. Not that I was completely not confident back then, because I wouldn't have done it, because it took a lot for me to do that, because I knew the backlash I was going to get. But because everything spiritual is in vogue, I guess, again, in like really sexy, everybody's talking about various different practices. And I said, okay, well, now may be the time for me to update this information, or to clarify a few things that I wasn't ready, or maybe things that I just didn't really know or understand at the time about myself or my history. So that's why the books are very, very different.
When you started and you were young and you were doing this and there was so little bibliography out there, what was your approach? I mean, did you have any other like colleagues that were academic, and also what made you combine being a practitioner with being also a historian and somebody who was interested in the lineage? I mean, because it seems like the stuff you're finding, would not really be combined unless you put those pieces together. I mean, I'm thinking of this book, Independence Lost, which was a Pulitzer nominated book, and it was about the people who lived on the edge of the American Revolution and didn't want it to happen. And it talked a lot about intermarriages between Scottish people and indigenous people, and a lot of the things that you talked about. But there's not one mention in this book of hoodoo, of root work, of anything of that nature. And so it seems like in a way, like you're kind of turning over rocks and finding things that, like, without making those combinations, would probably not really be something that could be discovered easily through historic bibliography.
Well, it wouldn't be, you know what I mean? Because first of all, whenever root work was spoken of, it wasn't, most of the time wasn't called root work, it's Negro superstition. You know what I mean? So that's about as close as you're going to get, I think, because it's always really condescending language. We just didn't matter. That's why people didn't write about it. You know what I mean? And the people that knew anything, they didn't want to speak about it. Again, it was just something for you and your family to pretty much explore or discuss, or people in your community. So I never expected to find anything other than, like being treated like a curiosity, the community being treated like a curiosity. I post on social media, like the different newspaper clippings when, like something happened, let's say in the Black community, and root work does come up. The language is always really negative, and You know, just like, oh, hey, look at them again, you know, being superstitious. And, you know, it just, I wanted to add to the conversation. I wanted to put American Black people on the map in terms of spirituality, because the emphasis on Africa, the emphasis on the Caribbean, the emphasis on Asia, the emphasis on Europe is always there. But it's like, you know, America is here, okay? American Black people have a spirituality. We have an expression that is informed by all of these different elements that we are. The problem is the, you know, kind of socio-political conversation, or people trying to, you know, just, I don't know, just push away the truth. You know, and Black people, white people, both don't want to deal with all of this. It's too much for most people that I've encountered. So I've gotten a lot of emails from people saying, wow, like, I never knew that. You know, why weren't we taught this in school? It's just because America is just being so racial, and everything being about race. You would think that people would be more open to discussing it, but people are not open to discussing these matters because they'll have to face painful aspects of their own history. And frankly, you know, when you ask one question, then the questions keep coming. You know what I mean? So nobody wants to deal with this, and I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid to, you know, ask questions. I'm not afraid to, you know, to put uncomfortable or challenging information out there. You know, but I didn't make all this stuff up. I showed you slides from anthropologists, you know, people that have been dead, you know, for centuries. This is not new information. It's there. It's just people are constantly looking in the same, at the same sources. They're looking at the same people. You know, that's really what's been happening, is this constant regurgitation of the same narratives over and over again. But I didn't just pull it out of thin air. All I did was go to the school library and look all this stuff up.
Yeah, and, you know, the happiest people that I know are the ones who don't put limitations on their mind. So,
Absolutely.
thank you so much, Tayannah. This has been so eye-opening, and you're so articulate. We really appreciate your time, and we're going to leave your information at the bottom so that everyone who's watching the video can click on links to your books and follow your Instagram feed. And also now I'm just going to send it back to www.brooklynbookfair.com, and hope everybody else and everybody who has tuned in enjoys the fair and enjoys all the other speakers.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tayannah.
Bye.